people can handle alcohol. The police know who you are. All right, our next panel is how to survive conventional AA meetings. And we have, from left to right, we have Shomit, Jill, and Gary.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shomit. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. So, I just want to say, it's great to see all these pantheistic folk under one roof. Thank you. Got it. All right, so, when I started AA, I went to conventional meetings for, first couple weeks. Good? All right. First couple weeks, and, at that point, as one of our friends, Perry, likes to say, I just wanted my ass to stop being on fire. And that's basically, what was the case for me. I just wanted to be around a bunch of people that understood some of the struggles that I was going through, and for some sort of, camaraderie amongst people who are aware of that itch at 5:55 in the morning when you're standing in front of a Circle K just waiting for them to start selling booze. But shortly after a couple of weeks after I started to kind of get the hang of AA, I started to look for other meetings. I always felt like an imposter when the Lord's Prayer came because I didn't know it, right? So eventually over time you learn it just through repetition. But for me these days, being able to, survive in a traditional AA context requires that I have a very clear conception of my own higher power. And so I'm going to read you this essay. It's about conceiving of a higher power. It's called We Are Made of Star Stuff. The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies, were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. The statement uttered by the renowned astrologist Carl Sagan is not meant to be pretty, it's not meant to be figurative or prosaic. It is a literal description of the biologic and physical processes that govern our bodies, the elements, the way they combine to form molecules of air and assemble into organisms is the same in the construction of stars. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, and it is in that ability to find and recognize patterns that science evolved, but make no mistake, science is a descriptive form. Though the foundations of science are accepted to be irrefutable, they are derived by human observation. An apple fell from a tree and hit Newton on the head. All apples fall when they detach from a tree. Newton's observation described gravity, a phenomenon that occurs with such consistency that it is accepted to be fact. There is no evidence to the contrary. I've searched my whole life for evidence of a higher power. In grad school, my emphasis was on spiritual poetry. Words linked in a certain combination, in a certain order, would cause me to have a very physical, visceral response. Certain passages quicken my breathing, raise my heart rate. Other writings give me goosebumps, make me tear up, or cause me to become aroused. I sought to understand this in creative writing, how words, which have no material substance and are intangible in and of themselves, could elicit such physical, bodily reactions. Despite this lean towards the spiritual, everyone who knows me will say that I am one of the most grounded persons they know. I took every opportunity I was afforded to push myself outside of my comfort zone, to experience the world as widely as possible, to be immersed in art, and to become informed of different cultures and perspectives. I use what I observe and witness to fill my brain with lists, flow charts, and diagrams. I'm constantly calculating the time it takes to execute a project, the capabilities and tendencies of people, the costs and reach of resources. I am a realist. I am a rationalist. I believe in causality and put my faith in science, which is to say, predictable outcomes. My mind is always occupied about what can be done with what is at hand, and this ultimately is exhausting. Jody, my therapist, laughs at my assessment of the obvious and agrees that I have control issues. She asks me if I even know how to relax, to just shut it all down and let it be. I don't, because my mind easily and naturally turns to the big questions like, why am I here? What is the point? Why even bother? Today, I strive to slow this train before it gains momentum. My ex summed it up succinctly in a letter. Your purpose cannot be contained by thoughts, words, or actions. When you weren't looking, when you weren't trying, your presence affected a world that only wants to be worthy of you. So beautiful, her faith in this idea, her unwavering belief that the purpose of our existence was not just to be shaped or defined, and it drove me crazy and to the bottom of a bottle, trying to manage the effect that I had on others, that I could not arrange circumstances to my own ego-driven purpose. Becoming in touch with my higher power and fostering my spirituality requires that I abandon the illusion that I have control. The foundation for this was set when I was finally exposed to the neurobiology associated with addiction, how an active addiction alters the relationship of the neocortex to the limbic system and hijacks my ability to make choices. That through processes described by science, an active addiction robs me of my will, my ability to control. What else can follow but a sense of helplessness, then of demoralization and despair? How did I become this way? I do not know. The trajectory of each individual life is a collection of variables that will never again be reproduced. Because of this utter uniqueness of the individual, no exact pattern can be established, no predictable, observable outcomes emerge. Science can describe general tendencies that may explain in broad strokes the factors that led to my addiction, but if I ask why I became this way, science fails me entirely. My purpose cannot be contained by words, thoughts, or actions. The only choice for me then is acceptance that I do exist and that my presence affects the world around me. The universe is functioning the way it does outside my comprehension and without my intervention. Who am I then, and to what ends do I resist? Everything I know to be reality is generated, operated, and destroyed by a power greater than myself. Generator, operator, destroyer. G-O-D. God. AA literature is written in a God-forward language. I've heard so many variations of the acronym to make the higher power more palatable. Group of drunks, good orderly direction, etc., etc. None of it really struck. It sounds so trite to say that I had a profound spiritual experience in a therapy group for addicts, that I found God. The first 10 days of these sessions, I was 1 foot out the door. It wasn't required by work or the state for me to stay. I had other things to do, projects and deadlines. Even in this program, I tried to exert control over the process, the dimensions and deployment of my recovery. I wanted to do it my way. I requested Patrick, but was assigned Jody. What I wanted was brushed aside for what I needed, a tough-as-nails counselor who, like a battle axe, cleaved into the roots of my addiction in a way that a year and a half of therapy barely touched. I thought I wanted the chaplain who was tough, a man's man, but I received Sister Mary Fran instead, who, wizened, kind, and gentle, in barely 5 words, made me feel understood, accepted, and forgiven. If I had been given what I wanted, if I had been able to control my recovery experience, I don't know that I would have experienced surrender, but something else was at play, arranging molecules and circumstances to deliver me from my ego-driven desires. Generator, operator, destroyer. This conception of God that I could finally get behind was blurted out by a 19-year-old recovering meth head who I had adopted as a little brother, who most had dismissed as wired too fidgety, too obnoxious, and antsy to take seriously. And yet revealed in a rant full of non sequiturs, there it was, sprung from a young drug-addled mind in recovery. Finally, a God of my own understanding, one whose reach and power is beyond my control, which is to say, beyond my limitations. The universe was functioning the way it does to place me in this program at the same time as this precocious kid, functioning the way it does to have me primed me to hear and internalize this conception of a higher power. Can I believe in Jesus? Of course. It's not hard to conceive of a person so at ease and in tune with the workings of a universe that he may serve as a teacher for those of us shaped to resist and assert the desires of our ego. Similarly, I can believe in Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, and Confucius, whose teachings were interpreted and recorded in the fallible language of less spiritually attuned folk. I can also see that such wisdom exists in a blade of grass, the way molecules of air bump into each other. Watching a tree in that courtyard, I feel a deep sense of calm and connectedness. This is the serenity that is promised us. This is God at work to form a gust that flutters a leaf, reflecting photons from the sun, bouncing light in my direction. This will happen with or without me. If I am present and receptive, I can become witness to the universe unfolding, can see that leaf wave like a hand, and hear a message rustling in the wind. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jill, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Jill. I'm going to start off by saying I am extremely nervous because I hate talking in front of people. I did have this nice little bullet point set out that I was going to kind of go by very rigid-like, but that's just not really going to work. I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about my experience as far as traditional meetings are concerned. Whenever I came back into AA, I found myself looking for a meeting close by my house, a meeting hall that had a lot of meetings, and it was easy, something I could just run into at any moment that I wanted to, because I had this urge and understanding that my survival kind of depended on it. And I found myself at an 8 a.m. meeting pretty much every day, and this meeting was coined the ABC meeting. And if any of you are familiar with the ABCs of Alcoholics Anonymous, it pretty much ends with, if God could or would if he were sought. And that really set me apart for a long time, being in this meeting. I didn't out myself immediately as an atheist, but as I spoke and shared, it became glaringly obvious. And of course, there was a few people in meetings that outed me for me and just didn't understand why. They say, Jill's in here, and she's an atheist. Well, she listens to you talk about God for an hour and 15 minutes every day. What is she doing? And I would just have to just hold myself, because I would want to cry and I would feel alone and I would just want to run away from this whole process, honestly. And I want to say around the 60-day mark, maybe, I discovered secular AA. So it took me a little while to kind of find you guys. But the moment that I did, I actually felt like I had found people that I could understand. And when initially my intent was to find just human beings, just to see a group of human beings that weren't suffering in every single moment that they were experiencing. I then found something a little bit better, was a group of human beings that were doing that, but also I understood what they were talking about. And with that came this balance that started to happen, because I also didn't want to give up my traditional AA either. I had started to make friendships sort of organically with people who were open-minded and didn't judge me. And I had this balance that happened where I had my secular AA group where I would get my yayas out about how frustrated I was, because yes, I would end up in step meetings, I would end up in 12 and 12 meetings, I would end up in tradition meetings, and I would just want to scream at, on top of the table, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And it wasn't until I got to sit down with a sponsor and we could even go line by line through the 12 and 12, and I could have not just an understanding, but some justification for some of my thought process, and that not all of my thought process was wrong, and that there was actually something good left inside me that I could still use, because there was so much that I was hearing that that told me that everything about me was wrong, and I didn't know how to recover with that attitude. And between the two groups together, actually, it's kind of had this wonderful stability, because while I absolutely love secular AA, there really isn't enough meetings to carry me through the week. You know, I find myself sometimes just having a hard day at a weird time of the day, and I'm in there at noon, you know, on a Tuesday, and I just need to find a place to go to, and I've kind of found that. And I mean, while I hate to say that it's taken me probably the better part of a year for those traditional meetings that I frequent for them to accept me, I have seen it happen. I've been very surprised to find that people have reached out to me knowing when I'm having a hard time, and the biggest thing I've noticed is that just when I can now sit in those rooms and be as honest as I possibly can. I used to have to say these sayings in my head in order to really like stomach what they were saying, like God brought me to AA and I found God in AA, and I'd have to replace it with I found myself in AA. My sickness brought me to AA and I found myself here. And while that helped in the beginning, that stuff did eventually sort of fade away. And I found that just taking that sort of breathless leap into being honest all the time. And I can admit that it's sometimes a huge blunder, where I am also the person who is sort of saying expletive, yeah, I don't believe that expletive, and people don't respond well to that. However, I kind of relish in the process of doing that too. I think that also doing the blunder helps me find that grace that people talk about. And I'm also not someone that ever thinks that I'm graceful, but people tell me that I still am, and I appreciate it. So I'm just glad that I can kind of blunder through it and still find this balance. And I just kind of want to just mostly my message is that there's so much support to be had on either side of the fence, and that, you know, if you stick with any particular group long enough and if you're as honest as you are, those open-minded people will find you, like they have for me. And I never really thought that that was going to happen, honestly. But I guess that's all I've got to share, but thank you guys.
Thanks to both of you. I'm Gary S. And I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm very accustomed to using my last name in the rooms. I was dragged into general service by my sponsor, who raised my arm when I was 6 months sober and said, he wants to be your GSR, at which point I never sat next to him again. But then I spent 25 years doing it. And that's the kind of stuff. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I got sober just south of San Francisco, and it was 1990, and it was news to me because that area, San Francisco, was actually a part of the Bible Belt. And it was like, wow, check that out. You know, people coming up to me and putting their finger in my face and saying, get God or die, and going, you know. And I was very, very fortunate because I had asked a man to sponsor me who, in spite of his devotion to his God concept, when he saw somebody do that with that finger one day, said, Gary, it's okay. Some of us are sicker than others. And nodded toward that person, because by that time I had told him that I was agnostic, because we were in the steps, and I hit the second step, and I said, shit, are they going to kick me out or what? You know, because I thought I had to do the God thing, because everybody around me kind of implied that. But he said, nah, we'll make room for you. And he suggested that I use good orderly direction, and I thought that was exclusively mine. And I thought, well, gee, thanks, Frank. That's wonderful. And you know, and I took it as my own, and none of you could have it. And Alcoholics Anonymous has been doing this for a really long time. We're 85 years old, and I became the archivist for part of Northern California, and so I've been in the history of this fellowship, and we have been, we are a reflection of society as a whole. But I come into these meetings and I get God and God and God, and I ended up out on the circuit for a couple of years and made the mistake a couple of years into that. I'm speaking a couple times a week all over the place. And I made the mistake of mentioning one night that I was an agnostic from the podium. And my phone stopped ringing. It was like somebody unplugged it. It was so quick and so immediate and so all-encompassing. And I had to learn that that's the environment I'm in. And so how do I survive in traditional AA? I survive by knowing that I, not the newcomer, by the way, am the most important person in the room because I am my job. None of you can be my job. You can be second, you can get second line easy. All you have to do is ask for help. But what I understand is that if I'm not sober, I can't help anybody. And so I am the first in line every time I walk in the room. And that allows me to ignore an awful lot of things that I want to take exception to. But that same sponsor taught me about love and tolerance being the code of the room in which I find myself, and that I no longer fight anybody or anything. And that's not how I came to AA. I came to AA, as I may have mentioned earlier, I have been asked to leave states by the authorities. And it had to do with my response to people disagreeing with me. And I did not disagree well. And I had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous to find the word amend. Because I thought if we disagreed, one of us would bleed and the other one would have to leave the county. And so when you get here, and depends on who you talk to here, because there's plenty of finger pointers. And I have to learn how to just say, thank you for sharing, and go find somebody like my sponsor who didn't care what I believed, couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. And when he died when I was 10 years sober, I said, well, gee, maybe I should carry this tradition on. And that has worked really well over the years. And in that general service conference, we get to go out and argue our point, because you'd be astonished how many fellow travelers we have in the structural aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous. More than one of our trustees from the podium has said, if it wasn't for the agnostics and atheists in AA, there'd be no general service. Now, that person clearly had an opinion, but it's remarkable how many fellow travelers we have. And but they too have probably learned from the podium that they have to be careful where they say that. Now, this movement is making it easier to be in traditional AA, because I no longer am banished or shunned. I don't know how many of you have been shunned in AA, but it happens. If you haven't had the opportunity, that just means you haven't been here long enough, and your day will come. And so, but it's really important for us to feel comfortable and be able to say, you know what? I have a third tradition, and it means that the chair I'm in belongs to me. I have to be able to stand up and say that. I don't have to be I'll be glad to get on my knees. No, that's not going to happen, thank you. And I don't have to do that. I have to be okay with saying, I am me and I am true to myself. And I can be honest in AA. In order to be, I continue to be an agnostic. I'm a middle-of-the-road guy. I figure, well, hell, a burning bush could happen next week. Who knows? The odds are pretty remote. I have not come around in the last 30 years, and there's a really good chance I might not. But I don't exclude the possibility. Because I've sponsored lots of people who believe of the prevailing religious community, and I've sponsored lots of people who are not. And the thing they have in common is alcoholism. And when I stay on topic in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, it becomes easy to stay in the room because I have a responsibility to carry the message. And for me, the message is you can all stay. Nobody can kick you out. And if somebody in a meeting wants to kick you out, I once had somebody in a room with 1,500 other people invite me to leave Alcoholics Anonymous, and maybe go find some place where it wasn't necessary, where I could not pray comfortably. And I just got, but I had my chance at the microphone too, and it was a great day. I had so much fun, and because I love a challenge. And as a benign anarchist, I'm not much of a conformist. I was once asked by the FBI just what that meant because I was registered to vote as a benign anarchist. They said, "What does that mean?" And I told them, I says, I think the whole thing will go away and I don't even have to help. But anyway, that was a different story. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, we get to stay. And what happens is we need to not play the role of Casper Milquetoast in AA. We need to say, you know what? I'm staying in the room because I have the third tradition that says all I have to do is have a desire to not drink. Nowhere does it say that I have to believe in your higher power or anybody else's higher power. It doesn't even insist that I have one. It suggests it. And as long as I remember that, I'm safe in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's really important for us to all remember that because we are outnumbered. But if you've been watching the statistics, we're catching up. Because science will win the day, in all likelihood. And we have to be there to keep the doors open for those who arrive with the scientific model. Because the other side's kind of, they're dying off, because they come from a generation. And the newer generation is increasingly open to our idea rather than theirs. So stick around long enough to be able to put your hand out and embrace the people who walk into the room. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. I'm John R. I have a hard time doing that too, because I was taught that you use your last name when you're among people that are friends. Anonymity is at the public level. But anyway, thank you. I appreciated it. I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had been a radical, fanatical, fundamentalist preacher. And I got here as a radical, fanatical, fundamentalist drunk. And it took many years of sobriety before I came to not believe. And one of the things that I found in sitting in the rooms, a lot of the transition happened probably I got sober in 1981, so I've been here for a little while. And somewhere around 10 or 12 years of sobriety, I really started looking at all of the old belief system that I had had. Up until that time, I was told, don't worry about it, don't sweat the little stuff, just stick with the big book, don't worry about that other book. And but I needed to look at it, and it was difficult. It was really difficult, emotionally and intellectually. What I found helped me sitting in a room, especially when I started hearing people preaching from the tables, in particular buzzwords like, you know, the world of the flesh as opposed to the spirit and all that kind of stuff. I had to look inside of me and find out that I had a problem with that stuff going on. And I needed to resolve it in myself. And I think what was happening was the battle that was inside of me that was going on was what needed to get resolved. And as I've been able to resolve that, I'm not saying I don't get upset sometimes, because I think it's inappropriate for people to preach in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I found that I really don't have anywhere near the kind of visceral reaction to a lot of the opinions and beliefs of people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think this thing is about what we believe. I think it's about what we do. And that's kind of what I focus on. I focus on that with anybody that I'm talking to. Really, it has more to do with what are they about and how can I help them. That's what my first sponsor told me. He said, my job is not to get you to believe what I believe. My job is to facilitate you coming to understand what you believe. It only took me 25 years. You know, but you know, some of us are slower than others, and I'm one of them. So I really appreciated what you all shared, and I'd like to get a copy of what you wrote, if I can. Thanks.
Hi, Ryan. My drug of choice was alcohol. You know, I've probably done 90 and 90 5 or 6 times in the past couple years. Again, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And you know, I went to a lot of traditional meetings to kind of fill that out. And you know, I was often in meetings where, you know, the topic was spirituality, and you know, it's pretty much God after God after God. And you know, I stood up pretty much every time when it got into that, and I explained how I'm an atheist and I don't believe, and I kind of shared how I do the program without God. Just because, you know, there might be someone in that room who's a newcomer and they might be scared of, you know, all the God talk. And, you know, I wanted to tell that person that, you know, you can do this. So, and I also do the opposite. If I'm in a secular meeting and there's too much God bashing, I kind of try to share to kind of stop some of that and, you know, try to make everyone feel welcome. And, you know, I think that's what we should all aim for.
Hello again. I thank you for your shares. I was, the AA police are here. I'm Scott. Is it not picking it up? Oh, okay, all right, thanks. There were a few things that helped me a lot to cope with people in AA. First of all, I came and I stopped using, and then I was stuck with all the shit that I had. And it didn't go away just because I stopped drinking. There's a study I looked at recently about a real high percentage of people that end up alcoholic went through stressful things in childhood, whether it's abuse, poverty, or whatever. There's a higher percentage of that, you know. So all those people come to AA, they bring all that stuff with them without the coping skills to deal with it. And then we have AA, which teaches you how not to drink, but it doesn't deal with a lot of the rest of the stuff. Okay. I wish this was facing them instead of you. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So the things that I found helpful, I just want to throw a few things out there. One was lots and lots of therapy. Helped me tremendously. And then I started going to Al-Anon a lot, and that really helped me with you people, because I found out I was trying to control you, and God knows that's impossible. or whoever knows. I know now. And also in finding myself, realized that what I was surrounding myself with, who I was listening to, who I was associating with was affecting me really strongly. So I had to really start paying attention to who I was with. Because when I first came to AA, I wanted everybody to like me. And then I found out there was a few people, at least more than a few people, that weren't really supporting me or helping me. And I had to stay the hell away from them. And I didn't realize that. I don't have to like everybody. Not everybody has to like me. But if I'm going to get better, I need to pay attention to what I'm feeding myself. And so I wanted to end with just a quick poem by David White. You must learn one thing the world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Thanks.
Hi guys, my name's Tim Hilton and I am here for the party. If I was still having a good time drinking, I'd still be drinking. I'm not, so I don't. Thank you guys for that. One of the things I just want to talk about, I owe my life to conventional AA. I had no idea there was a secular AA when I first came in, right? And the one thing conventional AA actually showed me was it was possible to get sober, and I never bought into the party lines or the religious stuff. And I was always pretty open about where I stood. And I remember in a meeting sometime I said one of my more controversial things, like, I forget exactly what it was, and someone, I was arguing, something someone had said, saying that's not true for everybody. And this one guy sitting next to me just said, well, it's in the book. And I looked at him, I said, it's just a book. Which I truly believe, which goes for our literature and everything. One of the things I'd love to encourage people, and I think it's real important for us to claim our own place and identity within AA, but I also think it's important for us to intermesh with other people. I do a Buddhist meditation meeting all the time. I'm not Buddhist, right? The theory's interesting and all that, but I believe in the meditation. I go to conventional AA not because I'm Christian. I'm not looking for a spiritual narcotic here. I'm looking how to change my own behavior and manage my own life in a rational kind of way. So we were talking about dogmas earlier, right? And I had to write this down because I have burned a lot of brain cells. I thought I was pruning out the weak ones. It turns out I was wrong. But wouldn't it be nice if AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, could be kind of a dogma park where everybody's roll with it, where everybody's dogma could get together. You ever been to a dog park? You've got all kinds of dogs of every size and shape imaginable having a good time interacting together. And that's what I hope this will turn into eventually. Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm an alcoholic. And I just want to say a couple things. I got sober in 1979 in Boston, and mainly through in the gay community. And my experience, I've never had a finger shoved in my face. I've never had anyone, tell me what I had to do. And I just throwing that out because, we only can speak from our own experience, and it's not to contradict anyone else's experience, but I just think it's important to, throw that out. I'm a member of the first and original WAAFT group here in Phoenix on Sunday evenings at 7:30, We Agnostics and Free Thinkers. And we're still going strong at Freedom Hall, so, if you want to come to the original WAFT meeting of Arizona, be welcome to do that. it was traditional AA, if you will, quote unquote, that saved my life. And in terms of how to survive, my answer, how to survive conventional AA if your ideas seem to be a little different. For me, I had such an overwhelming desire to stop drinking. And I was utterly convinced that I had one shot to get sober and that I couldn't fuck it up. There was no oops for me. That's me. A lot of people have different patterns. But for me, if I didn't take that opportunity that day that I was able to get through 24 hours without a drink, if I didn't repeat that on a daily basis, I wouldn't be able to do it again. Once the chain was broken, it was such a sense of relief. And so the pain of maybe having to sit through listening to stuff that I thought was bullshit was far less than the pain of contemplating a life as a hopeless, drunk, So for me, that was kind of the thing that helped me survive in AA. And then, 30, 35 years sober and moved here. And, I went to my usual meetings, and it just started to sound like Charlie Brown adults. His number always gets called. He always says the same old shit. All this Bible thumping crap. And then I found, the We Agnostics and Free Thinkers meeting. I think I went to the second meeting. So I'm not really a founding member, but I was there the second day, and with Ann and Jennifer. And it was like a breath of fresh air, just like a breath of fresh air. And the steps started opening up again. But, it's totally possible to get sober and stay sober and make progress in any kind of AA meeting. I think it's always important to remember that this whole thing started as a conversation between two people in Akron, fucking Ohio. Oops. Oh well. But the whole thing started as a conversation between two people. So there were no steps, there were no big book, there's no theology. That's my little share. Thanks.
I'm Carmel, and I'm an alcoholic. I think this is as nervous as I've ever been. So, I guess I'll just out myself. I'm a Christian. Right? I just want to say, as far as traditional meetings go, at the very beginning of my sobriety, I made a quick best friend who's atheist. And I learned and continue to learn so much about the differences and similarities. It was really eye-opening because I just never thought about it. It just never even occurred to me that it might be difficult for some people. Some people might be different, in some ways. But I learned that just there's so much that's the same. Like, it doesn't matter, I don't like the preaching either, or the God shit, because I don't want it to, stress out the newcomer either. I don't like that we say the Lord's Prayer or anything like that. I like the responsibility thing. So I think it's rad that a lot of you do that. Unity in AA is a big deal to me. And once I realized that there was some separation, I've tried to really embrace wanting there to be unity and acceptance and all that. You know what I'm talking about. I also got invited to We Agnostics, and I love that meeting. So it's super rad. I get to learn so much because the God thing is taken out of the equation, and like all of the practical stuff is, and sometimes when I'm in traditional meetings, I don't get any of that. So yeah, even though I believed something different, I believe so many of the same things, and it matters to me that that everyone feels accepted, and different ideas and opinions are welcomed. So I thank the panel for talking about the, navigating that stuff, and for the courage to to talk about it in traditional AA, because there's people like me who get my eyes open and it's like, oh yeah, there's something like that. Okay, right on. And like I said, the newcomers, wanting them to feel like it's not a religion, they're not at church, So thanks a lot.
My name is Jerry Lutz. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also the EPOP of Katkui. And the EPOP is Pope spelled backwards. And Church of the God of the Utterly Indifferent is Katkui. And that's how I flourished in AA. Because I wouldn't be back if I didn't flourish in the traditional AA meetings. And yeah, so if anybody's nervous, it's me. So, Jill, I'm with you. Yeah, so don't take life too seriously.
My name's Aaron Maynard. I'm an alcoholic. Yes, I decided to use my last name. If that's a problem, go on the internet and complain. I wanted to thank you three for your share. They were... You know what, just give me that. Okay. All three of you had very profound things to say that really stuck with me. And for me, I recently, just about a year or so ago, came to terms that I don't believe in God. And it's not out of any resentment or any kind of disdain or out of spite or anything. It's just a sentiment in traditional AA that's always been true with me is that my mind has to be open for limitless expansion if I hope to stay sober on a day-to-day basis. And in order for me to do that, I possess something that religion's not very fond of, and I question everything. And the more I started thinking about this, it just started to become apparent to me that, because I question everything, I realized that because religion and God is so heavily indoctrinated into our society, and how human beings can be vainglorious to a fault and give credit to something that is not necessarily unexplained but unsubstantiated, never made sense to me. And so when I started coming to terms with that, I started to find I found a better sense of truth for me. Now, contrary to popular belief, just because I don't believe in God, I think a common misconception is that we believe in nothing, which is, I'm not going to curse, it's horse-pucky. Because I definitely believe in, energy. I believe in spirits. I believe in the way I stay sober is just the sensory experience of life itself. Being able to take a silver lining in a lesson, no matter what happens, and regardless of whether the end result is in my favor or not, I can take a silver lining in a lesson and learn it to use it to, strengthen myself and be a better person. If time and history has taught me any certainty, is that when I find the balance between the passion in my heart and the reason in my mind, there's nothing that I can't understand, overcome, accept, or love. And that being said, I love you all very much. Thanks for having me.
I'm Jerry. My home group is Widening the Gateway in Las Vegas. You know, when I came to AA, in hindsight, I just never thought about it. You know, I was raised Catholic, so I figure I had a lot of experience in sitting around ignoring what was being said. You know? I just never thought about it, and I went 20 plus years like that, you know, whatever. I just never thought about it. And we moved to Las Vegas, which I discovered is part of the Bible Belt. And I was at a meeting, and there was a woman there, brand new, you know, couple days or maybe a week, and she was not having this God stuff. And, you know, I just couldn't understand why she couldn't ignore it. But she couldn't, you know, she couldn't. And so I got on, you know, the internet and found, I guess, AA Agnostica, and this was before Santa Monica. So we went to Santa Monica and, you know, got all the information, went back to Vegas, and my husband and I started a secular meeting there. But we were a little nervous because in Santa Monica we'd heard some horror stories about people not getting listed and some of that stuff. So we made it a no prayers meeting, basically. And that's what we still have. And I think there are still people who come in that don't think about it, you know? And they certainly come to our meetings sometimes like this. Like, not that anyone comes and says whatever, like I did, but you know, I think maybe the younger people, like has been said here, and if they do, you know, then they just go on to other meetings, whatever. So we have in Vegas now, I don't know, maybe 10 meetings over the last, I'm pretty sure it's around 10, you know. And most of them are listed as agnostic. Ours is listed as secular, and people still come and don't notice. So I don't know. That's all. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Double Dippin' Tim. I'm an alcoholic. One thing I appreciate what our God girl said here, and a lot of times when I'm sharing in meetings, I will say I'm not a God guy. I don't understand that, so this is what I do. And I think it's important that we not belittle people that think or believe differently than we do. And seriously, you know, because so many times I see it. I was at agnostic atheist meeting, secular meeting, about last spring, I guess. And there was a new girl in there, and she was obviously a God girl. And she just sat here and she said, "I'm so happy, you know, that God's helping me do all this stuff." And about 3 of the secular people after her share all at once chimed in saying, you know, "This isn't about God, blah, blah, blah." And please don't make me defend the Christians, okay? But I will, right? Because this was where she was getting her strength. And although I can't explain it and I don't understand it, I know it's out there, right? So whatever someone believes, you know, you help them get sober and you help them find what works for them. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Joel. I'm still a pothead and alcoholic. And just briefly give you my history and how I came to Agnostic AA is I went to a IOP, which for those who don't know is an intensive outpatient program, to quit smoking pot. And it was a 12-step program, but they weren't. It was Tempe Valley Hope. And they had a chaplain on staff there, and you know, they talked about the traditional 12 steps. And I always said that I struggled with the whole concept of God. And after I finished that program, I found a home group. I live in Ahwatukee, and I found a home group there. And I was going, you know, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and everybody was, you know, turning everything over to God. And it just didn't make any sense to me. And I finally, after 2 years, I stopped saying I'm struggling with the God concept. I had come to terms with myself, and by that point, I had heard about I had heard about the agnostic meetings. There was a flyer on one of the tables, And I went to my first meeting, and the first person that I talked to was a woman named Ann M. I don't know how many of you remember her, but Ann had been sober for 42 years, and she had been an atheist since she was like 6 years old. And a light bulb went off that, hey, you can achieve long-term sobriety without believing in God, without having, I don't know if Ann ever talked about having a higher power or not, but she was a beacon to me that this can be done, and maintaining my being true to myself. You know, there's a common phrase in AA, fake it till you make it. And I said, well, that doesn't quite square with this being a program of rigorous honesty. Because I wasn't being honest if I held hands and said the Lord's Prayer. I wasn't being honest. I wasn't being true to myself. And now if I go to a traditional AA meeting, I don't very often, because I just don't get anything out of it. You know, I go to a meeting to get inspiration from the other people in that meeting, and when I hear a bunch of people talking about turning it over to God and God's doing this for me, it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't teach me how I can stay sober. So I go to agnostic meetings because I get inspiration from all of you. And so I've just basically stopped going to traditional meetings. I'm not a guy that has to go to a meeting, that wants to go to a meeting every day. There's plenty of agnostic meetings in the Valley here for me, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, and we're done. It's lunchtime. Let's thank our panelists for their participation.